You're alone in the kitchen and you say something out loud. Okay, where did I put my keys? Nobody's there. Nobody asked. You just said it, in words, out into the empty room, and you probably didn't even notice you'd done it until a second later, when you caught yourself. Then came the small flash of self-consciousness. Did I just talk to myself? Am I one of those people now? You are, and so is almost everyone else. This isn't a quirk. It's one of the most common things a human brain does, and it turns out there's a very specific reason it happens the most exactly when nobody's around to hear it. In a study published in 2025, researchers had 222 people track their own self-talk for 2 weeks, logging real moments as they happened, not guessing afterward from memory. Only 2 of those 222 people, about 1%, reported never once talking to themselves. Everyone else did it regularly, in well over half of the specific moments researchers asked them about. This wasn't a fringe habit, it was close to universal. So the real question was never whether you talk to yourself, it's why, and why especially now, alone. To find the why, you have to go back to childhood, because you didn't start out whispering this to yourself. You used to say it at full volume, constantly. Watch a 4-year-old play alone with blocks, and you'll hear a running narration. This one goes here. No, this one. The blue one goes on top. In the 1930s, the psychologist Lev Vygotsky studied exactly this and came to a conclusion that was, at the time, unusual. Most researchers before him had assumed this out-loud narration in children was just confused, unfiltered thought, a sign the child hadn't yet learned to think properly. Vygotsky argued the opposite. He called it private speech, and he said it wasn't a flaw in thinking, it was a tool for thinking, a way for a young mind to talk itself through a task before it had the ability to do that silently. Private speech peaks around preschool and kindergarten age. Then, through the early school years, it doesn't disappear, it goes underground. Children start murmuring instead of talking, then moving their lips without sound, and eventually the whole process folds inward and becomes what you now call your inner voice. Here's the part that's easy to miss. That inward fold was never a hard stop. The tool didn't retire when it went silent, it just moved somewhere quieter, and it still works. In 2012, researchers Gary Lupian and Daniel Swingley ran an experiment where people searched through pictures for a specific object, sometimes silently, sometimes while saying the object's name out loud. When people said the name, they found familiar objects faster. Saying teapot while looking for a teapot didn't just describe what they were doing, it changed how quickly their brain located it, as if the sound of the word helped tune their eyes to the right shape and color. Say the wrong kind of cue, an unfamiliar brand name for an unfamiliar product, and the effect reversed. It slowed people down. The direction of the effect depended on whether the label actually matched something the brain already knew to look for. So, self-talk, even something as small as naming an object, isn't decoration on top of thinking. In the right context, it's doing part of the thinking. It gets more useful under pressure. Psychologist Ethan Kross and his colleagues have spent over a decade studying a very specific kind of self-talk. The kind where, instead of saying, "I have to get through this," you say your own name, or "You've got this," the way a coach would talk to someone else. In one study, people were given almost no time to prepare a 5-minute speech in front of judges, a classic way researchers induce real stress in a lab. The people who coached themselves in the second or third person, using their name or you instead of I, showed less shame and negative emotion afterward, less looping, replaying rumination, and were rated by outside observers as having performed better, not just felt better. Later work by the same research group found this same distanced self-talk pattern shows up on its own, unprompted, in about 1 in 7 self-talk moments people log in daily life. And it's especially common right before something people are dreading, which is exactly when it seems to help the most.
When Cross's team later asked people to describe their own real sources of social anxiety in the same language, most of what showed up wasn't stage fright. It was ordinary interpersonal friction, a tense conversation with a friend, a message you weren't sure how to answer, outnumbering performance anxiety by a wide margin. The coaching voice, in other words, isn't mainly for big performances. It's for the small, everyday moments of talking to another person that quietly cost you the most. Talking to yourself like you're someone else, even for a few seconds, seems to create just enough distance to think more clearly. The same 2025 study found this coaching voice shows up most and helps most in one particular kind of moment, right before you do something, not during it and not after. Preparing for a hard phone call, rehearsing what you'll say to a doctor, running through an apology in your head on the walk over. That specific window, the moment right before, is where distanced self-talk was most reliably linked to people actually feeling better going in. This is probably a good moment to deal with the fear a lot of people quietly attach to this. Is talking to yourself, especially out loud, a warning sign of something? The short answer from the research is no, not on its own, and the reason why is specific. In conditions like schizophrenia, some auditory hallucinations are thought to come from a breakdown in a very particular brain process, one where your mind normally tags its own internally generated thoughts as, well, its own. Some researchers describe it as a kind of self-monitoring error. The brain loses track of the fact that it produced the inner voice itself, and the thought gets misread as a voice coming from outside. That misattribution, not the presence of an inner voice, is the actual clinical concern. Ordinary self-talk, even said out loud in an empty room, doesn't have that confusion built in. You always know it's you, which means the version of talking to yourself you do in your kitchen isn't a milder cousin of anything alarming. It's a completely different and completely normal mechanism. So if this tool never really goes away, if it kept working quietly your whole life, why does it specifically escape out loud when you're alone? Go back to that private speech Vygotsky tracked in children. It didn't just quiet down with age on its own. Studies of when children's private speech gets louder or softer show it responds directly to who's around. Around adults, especially unfamiliar ones, children's out-loud self-narration tends to drop, replaced by whispering or silence. Around nobody, it comes back out. The same diary study that tracked those 2 weeks of real self-talk also logged what triggered it. People reached for the coaching, distanced version most in 2 kinds of moments, being hard on themselves and actively trying to feel better. Not random chatter, but 2 very specific jobs, criticism and repair, both of which are exactly the kind of thing you'd rather not do in front of an audience. That pattern doesn't switch off in adulthood, it just becomes the whole explanation. Talking out loud to yourself carries a small social cost. It can look strange to somebody watching. So most of the time, your brain keeps that regulatory tool running the way it always has, but keeps it silent, filtered through the same self-monitoring system that quietly edits everything you'd rather not say out loud in front of other people. Take the other people away, and there's nothing left to edit for. The tool that's been running the entire time, tuning your attention, coaching you through stress, narrating your own plans back to yourself, simply stops being muffled. What you hear in an empty room isn't a new voice. It's the one that was talking the whole time, finally loud enough to notice. So the next time you catch yourself narrating your grocery list out loud or coaching yourself through something hard by your own name, that's not a crack in your composure. It's the same system a 4-year-old was running out loud over a pile of blocks, still working, just older, and for one specific moment, unmuffled. What's the last thing you caught yourself saying out loud, alone? Tell me in the comments. I'd genuinely like to know I'm not the only one.